really need to stand up and start using the Vedas for their original purpose, to take back our heritage, to take back this lineage from the corrupted leaders, and to start using it to help people. Okay, text 26, translation. The burden of the earth was certainly diminished by the personality of Godhead and by others as well. When he was present as an incarnation, all good was performed because of his auspicious footprints. Text 27, translation. Now she, the chaste one, being unfortunately forsaken by the personality of Godhead, laments her future with tears in her eyes, for now she is being ruled and enjoyed by lower-class men who pose as rulers. Purport. The Kshatriya, or the man who is qualified to protect the sufferers, is meant to rule the state. Untrained, lower-class men, or men without ambition to protect the sufferers, cannot be placed on the seat of an administrator. Unfortunately, in the age of Kali, the lower-class men, without training, occupy the post of a ruler by strength of popular votes, and instead of protecting the sufferers, such men create a situation quite intolerable for everyone. Such rulers illegally gratify themselves at the cost of all comforts of the citizens, and thus the chaste Mother Earth cries to see the pitiable condition of her sons, both men and animals. That is the future of the world in the age of Kali, when irreligiosity prevails most prominently, and in the absence of a suitable king to curb irreligious tendencies, educating the people systematically in the teaching of Srimad-bhagavatam will clear up the hazy atmosphere of corruption, bribery, blackmail, etc. Personally, I don't know how anyone or any knowledge or any line of thinking could describe the situation more clearly as to what's going on today. That the rulers are out of control, they're not qualified, they're not trained, that they put their comfort at all costs over the comforts of the citizens, that they do every kind of irreligious, sickening activity in order to demoralize the people and to throw it in our face. So this is not just a system of complaining, but there's a solution. The solution is that if we look to this ancient knowledge as codified in the distilled version of the Srimad-bhagavatam, Bhagavad-gita, etc., that we can start to protect ourselves from the onslaught of these rogues and rascals who have taken up the executive seat. Text 28, translation. Maharaj Parikshit, who could fight 1,000 enemies single-handedly, thus pacified the personality of religion and the earth. Then he took up his sharp sword. Purport. As described above, the personality of Kali is he who deliberately commits all kinds of sinful acts which are forbidden in the revealed scriptures. This age of Kali will certainly be full of all activities of Kali, but this does not mean that the leaders of society, the executive heads, the learned and intelligent men, or above all the devotees of the Lord, should sit down tightly and become callous to the reactions of the age of Kali. In the rainy season, certainly there will be profuse rainfalls, but that does not mean that men should not take means to protect themselves from the rains. It is the duty of the executive heads of the state and others to take all necessary actions against the activities of Kali or the persons influenced by the age of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit is the ideal executive head of the state. That is the way of stopping the activities of Kali, as exhibited herein by Maharaj Parikshit, the Maharata. Text 29. When the personality of Kali understood the king, he at once abandoned the dress of a king and, under pressure of fear, completely surrendered to him, bowing his head. Purport. The royal dress of the personality of Kali is artificial. The royal dress is suitable for a king or Kshatriya, but when a lower-class man artificially dresses himself as a king, his real identity is disclosed by the challenge of a bona fide Kshatriya like Maharaj Parikshit. A real Kshatriya never surrenders. He accepts the challenge of his rival Kshatriya, and he fights either to die or to win. Surrender is unknown to a real Kshatriya. In the age of Kali, there are so many pretenders dressed and posed like administrators or executive heads, but their real identity is disclosed when they are challenged by a real Kshatriya. Therefore, when the artificially dressed personality of Kali saw that to fight Maharaj Parikshit was beyond his ability, he bowed down his head like a subordinate and gave up his royal dress. So this is certainly the situation of today's so-called executive heads. They are so cowardly and so low down, and that they send all these young people to go off and to die in these wars, but they themselves never ever face the battlefield. I think that in the future the system of war should be the president or the executive head should be at the leader of the troops. There should be 1,000 one country's best troops and 1,000 of another country's best troops, with the executive head leading the troops, and whoever wins that battle is considered to have won the war. And all this idea of killing civilians and bombing cities, this is completely, according to the Vedic perspective, this is completely against the laws and the codes of war. For example, during the Vedic time, when there was a war for a righteous cause, you were not allowed to attack an enemy from behind. You were not allowed to attack an enemy that had fallen off his chariot. There were so many rules and regulations of warfare. What to speak, it would be unthinkable for a truly brave warrior to even consider killing a woman or a child indiscriminately. They would rather commit suicide than to do that. Now, basically, the entire warfare is conducted on the principle of killing women and children, destroying cities, indiscriminate killing, killing from a remote location. This is a sickness. This is madness. This is not Kshatriya. This is not real warrior. It seems like it's very difficult to get rid of war completely, but if there is a war, there has to be certain reforms that take place, and I think the primary one should be that the executive head of the country should lead the troops into battle, and I think in that way, either they'll be exposed as cowards and thieves and liars, and that who would want to go to war for such people? Okay, text 30. Maharaj Parikshit, who was qualified to accept surrender and worthy of being sung in history, did not kill the poor surrendered and fallen Kali, but smiled compassionately, for he was kind to the poor. Purport. Even an ordinary Kshatriya does not kill a surrendered person, what to speak of Maharaj Parikshit, who was by nature compassionate and kind to the poor. He was smiling because the artificially dressed Kali had disclosed his identity as a lower-class man, and he was thinking how ironic it was that although no one was saved from his sharp sword, the poor, lower-class Kali was spared by his timely surrender. Maharaj Parikshit's glory and kindness are therefore sung in history. He was a kind and compassionate emperor, fully worthy of accepting surrender even from his enemy. Thus the personality of Kali was saved by the will of providence. So here we see that, according to the codes of a true warrior, that even though Kali was up to no good, but as soon as he surrendered, his life was spared, because it was against the codes of warfare to kill an enemy that had surrendered. And also, it's the will of providence that this is the age of Kali, that there's, in one sense, no avoiding it, just like there's no avoiding winter. It's coming. It's going to happen. We have to prepare for it. So it's also, he was saved by the will of providence. Text 31, translation. Thus the king said, "We have inherited the fame of Arjuna. Therefore, since you have surrendered yourself with folded hands, you need not fear for your life, but you cannot remain in my kingdom, for you are the friend of irreligion." Purport. The personality of Kali, who is the friend of all kinds of irreligiosities, may be excused if he surrenders, but in all circumstances he cannot be allowed to live as a citizen in any part of a welfare state. The Pandavas were entrusted representatives of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, who practically brought into being the battle of Kurukshetra, but not for any personal interest. He wanted an ideal king like Maharaj Yudhisthira and his descendants like Maharaj Parikshit to rule the world, and therefore a responsible king like Maharaj Parikshit could not allow the friend of irreligiosity to flourish in his kingdom at the cost of the good fame of the Pandavas. That is the way of wiping out corruption in the state, and not otherwise. The friends of irreligiosity should be banished from the state, and that will save the state from corruption. So here we see that this is one of the main defenses we have in the age of Kali, that these leaders, these corrupted leaders, must be forced to surrender. Otherwise, they're just going to keep taking advantage of us and exploiting us and keep doing insane economic policies, unrighteous warfare where so much blood is shed of the innocents, and while they cower in their parlor and pass resolution, this and that, to keep further control over the people.